And when I was in 4th or 5th grade, I was at my dad's house for the weekend. And when I was in like that age, up to like 7th or 8th grade, I was a really big NASCAR fan. Anyone, any NASCAR fan? I can't really see you guys this morning. I see one hand, I think, back there. I was a huge Mark Martin fan. I loved Mark Martin. And it was one Sunday, it was like the Daytona 500 or Talladega, one of those big races. And I was so excited to watch the race that Sunday. My sister, however, she's a couple years younger than me. She had a different idea about what we should watch on TV that day. See, back then we didn't have iPads. There wasn't like 7 TVs in our house. That was at my dad's. There was the one TV in the living room. She had this VHS tape, Pocahontas, the Disney movie Pocahontas, that she wanted to watch that day. And we got in a fight, and we were yelling and screaming, and she was crying, and I was denying that I pushed her. You know, all those things typical siblings do. And she won, I guess, because my dad hated me. I don't know. She won, I think, because I was being a little bit mean, and my dad said she gets to watch Pocahontas. Well, I got really upset, so I decided to run away from home. So I just walk out the door, and he came and he tried to find me, and I kind of hid and kind of ducked him a little bit. I saw him driving the car around the neighborhood. But I decided I was going to run all the way, I was going to run away from home to my other home at my mom's house, right? But as I started walking, it became not only this idea of like, man, I'm mad, so I'm leaving. It was kind of this like adventure thing. You guys ever start something that's just, just kind of do it out of spite, then all of a sudden it's like, man, this could be kind of cool. You always see like on TV shows, people run away from home. I'm going to run away from home, and I'm going to go to my mom's house. The only problem, my dad lived in South Ashland. My mom lived out back of Colgrove in Deering, like Gina Lake Road, where the Blue Flame is. Like, that's a lot of miles. I didn't understand that as a kid, but I just started walking. I had my backpack on. I was like 4th or 5th grade. I'm gonna do this adventure. It's gonna be awesome. Well, I was at least pretty smart as a kid because I realized like if I'm gonna do this incredible adventure, it's hot outside. I had this like weird denim like long sleeve shirt. I don't even know where that came from. It was like 90 degrees that day. The sun was beating down. I was like, man, I need some hydration, right? I was a smart kid, so I stopped at the gas station there. Where like the old Blockbuster was. The Blockbuster was still in existence there. Tells you how old I am. The Blockbuster was there, and there's like the Ashland Tennis Center. There's a gas station there with pop machines out front. So I was like, I need to get some hydration. So I stopped, and for some reason I had $2. And back then, cans of pop were 50 cents. I got me 4 Dr. Peppers, because that is clearly the greatest thing you need to have for hydration, right? So I put those in my backpack, and I walk all the way down through Ashland, all the way past the Speedway, past where Kroger is. I get to like the big intersection there where you get on the bridge. I had to go down a block because only one of the Ashland bridges have a sidewalk, right, where you can get across the bridge. I crossed the bridge. This is all a true story. 100%. My mom's back in the nursery. She can verify this between services if you need me to. I crossed the bridge. If you guys ever noticed, those things don't just like stay still. Those things are like shaking, so it like freaked me out. A train went underneath me. So I get to the other side. There's 52, right? 4-lane highway. I'm like, can't go back now, right? So I passed the 4-way highway. I'm like 10 or 11 years old. So I passed the highway, and I'm walking, and I see like a shortcut, like through Colgrove, kind of down by Colgrove Lane Street, if you're familiar with Colgrove. But my grandfather lived on Lane Street. And I said, you know what? If he sees me like walking by like a random Sunday afternoon, he's going to know something's up. So I go like the wrong way. I go like the long way, and I got right to the Colgrove like exit sign, right? And a cop pulls up behind me. Says, hey, where are you going? Now, I knew well enough not to say like 5 miles down 243, right? I'm walking home as this kid. So I said, I'm going to my grandpa's house just down the road here on Lane Street. He said, okay, I'll give you a ride. I said, no, I'll walk. He's like, no, I insist, I'll give you a ride. So here he is. He sticks my 4th or 5th grade self in this cop car, and he takes me to my grandpa's house. So any grandparents in here in the house? Any grandparents? I just want you to imagine you're just a nice Sunday afternoon. You're sitting watching TV in your living room, and all of a sudden a cop car pulls up, and your 10-year-old grandson comes up and says, hey, Papa, what's going on? Out of the cop car. It says, I'm going to go in the back room and watch the race, if that's okay. And I just went back there, and I just remember that night, my mom came and picked me up. And I was just ready for her to lay the hammer down, right? Like, I'm going to be grounded from, like, everything forever. But luckily, as you guys know, and a lot of families, when divorce, like, they hated each other. They were more mad at each other than at me, right? So she comes in, and she's like, you know what, Jimmy? Thought a lot about it. And, that waiting is the worst part, right? Like, when you're waiting for the punishment. And she said, what you did wasn't right. You have to be punished. You are grounded from 1 week. I was like, Okay, not bad. From the telephone. I didn't even know if I'd ever talked on the telephone up to that point. So I was like, oh, I don't know, Mom. I don't know if I can handle that. That's a good punishment. And we went on, and now I have this awesome story to tell that truly happened. You can ask my mom after the service. And here's the reason. You might ask, well, what does this have to do with loving your neighbor? Why are you sharing this story? And the reason I just kind of picked out, actually asked Megan, my wife, this week, what's your favorite story of my life that I tell? And it was that one. And the reason I wanted to share is because there's several different things. Maybe you're a NASCAR fan here, right? And as soon as I said NASCAR, you're like, we need to talk about Mark Martin. He was a heck of a NASCAR. Like, he kind of got robbed a couple times. Stupid Jeff Gordon messed him over. Like, we could talk about that. Some of you, you're maybe from a broken home. Your parents got divorced when you're young. We could talk about that, right? An instant connection. You're kind of interested like that. Some of you have a husband or someone in your family that's always watching the race on Sunday mornings. You're like, go Kristen, watch Disney movies instead of the race. So you'd want to talk about that. Some of you just love Dr. Pepper. Anyone just love Dr. Pepper? You're like, now I'm your favorite person because we have this bond, right? We can go on and on and on. And the reason why I share all of that is because I wanted to point out how powerful a story is. Just by one story, I created like 100 different things you and I could talk about, 100 different ways you and I can connect. And there's something about telling a story. There's something about sharing a story from your life that can bring people together, that can challenge you, that can encourage you, that can create a connection unlike anything else. And throughout this series, we've been talking about how to love your neighbor. And in week 1, Trent talked about Jesus' mission in this world was to help us find our hope and find our purpose through Jesus Christ. And because that's Jesus' mission, guess what? That's our mission, right? And you remember he talked about the woman at the well and how she was a Samaritan, and the Jews, they didn't like the Samaritans. And as a matter of fact, the Jews actually went out of their way to avoid Samaria so they didn't have to deal with the Samaritan people. But instead, Jesus, instead of avoiding them like everybody else does, Jesus went right to Samaria, and he talks in the middle of the day to this woman who is at this well. When you're not supposed to be at the well, you're supposed to be doing other things, but she went in the middle of the hot of the day to avoid people because of her checkered past. And Jesus loves her, and he accepts her, and he gives her a purpose in life, and she goes back and she tells other people. So it's kind of the big idea of this whole story is in your life, are you going out of your way to avoid people, or are you going out of your way to bless people? Because we're all going out of our way. You're either going out of your way, either figuratively or sometimes literally, to avoid people, or you're going out of your way to bless the people in your life. And God has called us to love our neighbor. God has called us to bless people. And throughout this series, we've had this helpful acronym, the BLESS acronym, where with the B in bless, the word bless. The B, we talked about beginning with prayer. That if we want to love our neighbor, if we want to make a difference in other people's lives, we need to start every morning just, God, how can I be the answer to someone else's prayer? The second, the L, is listen. So often we think we know what people need, but we don't actually take time to listen to people. We think we have all the answers instead of actually listening to what other people have to say. And quick sidebar, something I've become convinced of here lately. And I've said this phrase to a few people, and they're like, I don't really understand you, but I think it's profound. I do not believe you can listen with your mouth closed. So you got that backwards. You can't listen with your mouth. No, I don't think you can listen with your mouth closed, because a lot of us, my small group, we had a small group about the listen. And I said, how many of you are good listeners? And we all just went around the room ranking ourselves like 1 to 10. Everyone was like a 7 or 8. And I was like, listen, I'm up here preaching a lot. I see you. You guys are not good listeners, right? Like, all of us can't be good listeners, and maybe a lot of those are. But what I've learned is you can't just listen by just sitting around and waiting for other people to talk. You actually have to ask questions. You actually have to go to people and talk to them and say, hey, man, how's it going? And when they say fine, you actually have to ask follow-up questions. How's the family? How's work? How are you doing? How's life? What's this situation? You have to ask really good questions. You can't listen with your mouth closed. You have to go to people and ask them like real questions. That's very, very vital. The third is actually probably one of the most profound from the whole series. The one I've heard people talk about the most is the E, eat. Maybe it's because we like to eat, right? Like I was all for that series. But Jesus used meals and parties to connect with people. And so many of us, we work through lunch, or we're going through drive-thrus, and we don't take the time to sit down and eat with people and to hang out with them and get to know people and connect with them. There's something about eating with someone that creates a bond that's truly unlike any other. So if anyone wants to apply that and invite me and Megan over for dinner, we'll come eat if you have something good. So we eat. That was the E. The first S is serve. Last week, Tony, amazing job talking about how we need to serve people. We need to love people. We know this, right? Jesus modeled this. We need to serve. But the last one, the one we want to talk about briefly today, is to share your story. Now, share your story. And I'll be honest, this is going to be the one that's going to be the toughest for many of us. It's going to be the one that's going to cause us to kind of get out of our comfort zone, cause us to kind of really do something. But here's the reason why. It's because the reason why we want to share our story is because I truly believe that your story can change someone else's story. Your story can change someone else's story. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to circle back. Week 1, Trent talked about the woman at the well, John chapter 4. Now, Jesus came to her, and if you remember the story, Jesus is like, hey, what's up? And, go back to your husband. She's like, I'm not married. And he's like, yeah, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with right now isn't your husband. She was all ashamed of her past. She was ashamed, and they kind of talk, and they kind of start talking about some spiritual stuff, and Jesus is like, listen, I'm the Messiah. And she's like, oh my gosh, you are the Messiah. And she believes that Jesus came to be the Savior of the world, and this incredible thing happened. We're going to pick up in, verse 28. Actually, 27. It says, just then, so after Jesus says, I'm the Savior, I'm the Messiah, and she believes in him. Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. So back then it was kind of a little bit taboo for a man to just kind of be talking to a woman. But listen, this is my favorite part of the whole story. He said, but no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking with her? If you guys have read the Gospels, you know all the time the disciples and other religious leaders, they're always like, Jesus, why are you eating with tax collectors and sinners? Or why are you hanging out with that person? Or, hey, you're this person that needs healing from being blind or something is hollering out for Jesus to heal them. And they're like, hey, man, quiet down. And Jesus is always like, no, these are the people that I need, right? So you notice in John, they kind of put this little note here. They want to point out, hey, we didn't ask anything stupid this time, right? They're like, hey, we weren't stupid this time. But you can tell because they put it there. They thought like, man, Jesus, why are you talking to this person? And what does this woman actually want? Then check out what happens in verse 28. It says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Can you imagine Jesus coming to you and just saying, here's everything. Here's your life. I know every single thing about your life, everything you've ever done, everything you've ever thought, but he still loved you and accepts you anyway. Isn't that amazing? That's who Jesus is. He says, come see a man who has told me everything I have ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way toward him. We're going to skip down to verse 39. It says, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony. Her testimony. What's a testimony? It's you telling a story, right? If you get called to be a witness in a trial and you're supposed to give a testimony, what are you giving? You're giving your side of the story. And because of her story, of what Jesus had done in her life, many of these Samaritans believed in Jesus. Her testimony was that he told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, because of the teachings of Jesus, many more became believers. See, because this woman was willing to share her story, the story of many more Samaritans, many more people, so many people were changed forever because she was willing to share her story. Listen, your story, the story of your pain, the story of your triumphs, the ups, the downs, the story of when you met Jesus, the story of the struggles you went through in life, all of that goes into your story. And your story, if you would share it, if you would share it with people who, when they're going through similar struggles or when they're going through other great things or whatever it is, or when they need to know Jesus, when you share your story can change someone else's story. That's how powerful story is. So what I want to do today real quick is I want to give you three kind of three kind of tips on how you can share your story well from here at the Woman in the Well. That if you really want to bless other people, if you really want to make a difference in other people's lives, you have to start talking and opening up and sharing what God has done in your life. I want to give you 3 tips here from John chapter number 4. If we go back, we go to verse 28. And we'll see that the first thing that we have to do So we have to get out of our comfort zone. Verse 28 says that the woman, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." She leaves her water jar and she goes back to the town. She gets out of her comfort zone. Now listen, I have a couple of memes because I like memes I'm wanting to share with you today. Here's how most of you feel about your comfort zone. You're kind of in your comfort zone right there. And you're like, all right, I have to get out of my comfort zone. All right, 3, 2, 1, and you go, and you scream. Everyone do that on the count of 3. Just go, really loud, all right? 1, 2, 3. Pretty good, pretty good. I think we just got one. Do we need to do a second one? 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's not as good. Then you do a thing, right? You do something out of your comfort zone. You do something out of your comfort zone. Then you come back and you do 1, 2, 3. Who's that? I don't know who that one is. Some of you sound really weird. All right, second one. 1, 2, 3. And then you guys relate to that second to last one, right? You just fall back into your comfort zone after you get out of your comfort zone and you say, all right, that's it for today. How many like just one comfort zone thing a day, right? But here, if you're like me, though, let's go ahead and do this one. This is more relatable to me with my comfort zone. It says maybe you should try stepping out of your comfort zone more. We all think, yeah, that's a good thing to step out of your comfort zone, right? Psh, I'm never in my comfort zone. I don't even have a comfort zone. I am literally always uncomfortable. Anyone else like that? You're always uncomfortable? That's how I live my life. I promise I feel just always uncomfortable. If you ever notice, a lot of times, like when worship, I'll stand in the back, in the middle, where people are higher than me. Or if like I'm in a movie, I always sit like on the edge in like the back corner because I'm a big deal. I'm like 6'2" or 6'3", like 300-some pounds. Like I'm getting in people's way. Or like I don't like crowds, and it's not because I'm claustrophobic. People are kind of annoying sometimes, but it's normally like I'm afraid like I'm gonna hit people or run into people. Or I'm like feel like Andre the Giant, like lumbering through everywhere. Like I'm just generally uncomfortable. And getting up and on a stage and talking to people. I remember when I was in school, I promise you, I was the kid. That's how funny it is that I'm up here talking to a crowd right now. When I was in school, if we had to do like a oral exam or a book report or a presentation, I promise you, I was the kid that was just up there. Of course, I was sweating because I always sweat, but I was just the kid that was just pee his pants if I had to be in front of everybody and talk to a group of strangers. Like it's just uncomfortable for me. But the thing that I've thought about a lot is I think it's a real shame of how comfortable that we get just in our shame, in our guilt, in our embarrassment of our past. We get comfortable just kind of hiding the dark things in our life. We get comfortable because in our embarrassment, in our shame, because we don't want to share kind of the rough patches in our life. We don't want to share the dark moments in our life. We don't want to share the warts that we have. We don't want to share the weaknesses. We want to put on this brave face. We want to look all great on Instagram and Facebook. We want to have everything filtered. Listen, we can tell that you're like touching things up on Instagram. Like, don't use the smoothing filter. It's okay. You look good just the way you are, but we want to look all buttoned up. We want to look all cleaned up. We want our life to be perfect, and we don't want to share our struggles. We don't want to share our embarrassments. We don't want to share our mess-ups. We don't want to share our weaknesses. And we've got comfortable in our shame. We've got comfortable in our guilt. We've got comfortable in our embarrassment. And what this woman does that I love so much is, listen, she leaves her water jar. Listen, nothing in the Bible is just there because it's there. Everything's important. Every detail is there for a reason. And they choose to point out she leaves her water jar. And she goes out back into the town. Remember, she was there because she was embarrassed. She was there because she was ashamed of her past. She was there because she was worried about what other people were going to say about her, what other people thought about her. But you know what she does when she meets Jesus? She gets out of her comfort zone. She leaves her water jar. It must be like a middle school thing because she leaves her water bottle. You ever been around like young kids? There's just water bottles everywhere. But she leaves her water jar. And she goes right back to the people that she's worried that are going to judge her. Right past the people. Right to the people that have talked bad about her, that look down on her. The same people she'd been hiding her past from. The same people she had been hiding her story from. And she goes right up to him and says, "This is Jesus. Let me tell you about what he's done for me." She leaves her comfort zone. She leaves her past. She leaves her guilt. She leaves her shame. She leaves her embarrassment behind to go and help other people meet Jesus. Today, if you want to love your neighbor, if you want to make a difference in the world, if you want to make a difference in one other person's life, I promise you, no one has ever made a difference in someone else's life by staying in their own comfort zone. If you want to do something good for someone else, if you want to do something great with your life, it's going to take getting out of your comfort zone and beginning to share those things that are uncomfortable to share about. It's getting up here and sharing about the struggles that you have in your life, or about the things that you've dealt with, the things that you've had to learn about God, the things you have to learn about the world, the issues that you've had, warts and all, weaknesses and all, the things you're embarrassed about, the things you're ashamed about, in order to tell the story so you can help someone else get through the things that God has helped you get through. This woman leaves her water jar, and she goes right back to the place she'd been hiding from. She gets out of her comfort zone. If you want to love your neighbor, if you want to help other people find their purpose, if you want to find your purpose in life, it's not found in your comfort zone. And maybe it's going to take just every day you just run out of your comfort zone for a minute and you run back as fast as you can, and maybe that's a good start. But you have to get out of your comfort zone. The second one is this. You have to share your experience. Share your experience. Let's emphasize your experience. There's something powerful when you share your experience. Verse 29, she doesn't come up and the woman doesn't say like, well, here's this and here's that, and if you got ran over by a truck tonight, you know where you... No, she doesn't do any of that. She said, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? She comes to them and she shares her story. And here's the thing, I think some of you are kind of like my wife Megan. We talked this week. I was kind of struggling with the message. I was like, hey, Eric, could you help me with a couple of these things? I was just asking her some questions, and she said, the thing I struggle with is when I hear share your story, I think my story is kind of boring. I think is the word she used, and I don't think it's not great. She's like, I never was addicted to drugs and turned my life around. Like, I've just always went to church. My parents are still together. Like, they're great, and they were great with me, like all these different things. And what was so powerful about that, though, is as we were talking, and again, back to you have to ask questions in order to actually listen. We're actually doing Couch to 5K right now because we want to run a 5K at Thanksgiving, so we were running and walking, mostly just breathing really heavy and being really tired and almost puking. We were running Couch to 5K, and we were just talking, and I was just asking questions, and she ended up telling a story that she'd never told me. We've been together several years now. We've been married since 2012. Like, she never had told me this story, and she told like how it's affected like her a little bit, and like some of the things that it's caused her. I'm not going to share the story because it's her story to tell, but what was fascinating to me is like I'd never heard that. And it's actually, when she shared that, it kind of clicked off a few light bulbs in my own head. And even this past week, as I've kind of went throughout my week and dealt with some of the things that I've dealt with in my day-to-day, I've kind of went back to her story. And it's helped me, like what she had learned about God and what she had learned about herself and about life and what Jesus had taught her through her experience, I applied to my own life. Even my wife sharing her story, this story that she had kind of not hidden from me, but I just never had asked enough good questions to get to this story. Even her sharing just that little piece of her story made an impact on me this past week. And so many of us, we use the excuse, well, my story is so boring. Or, man, I can't speak into that person. I don't know what they're going through. But listen, we have to be willing to share our experiences. I came across a YouTube video a couple months ago, and I promise I've watched this like 10 times already, and it's really powerful. It's Stephen Colbert, the late night host. He's a Catholic. He believes in God, but he lost his dad when he was a young guy, and he talks a lot. You can find some stuff online about how that affected him. But he was being interviewed, this is a while back, by Anderson Cooper, the CNN news anchor. And for a little, just kind of a setup, just kind of some context, a few months before this was aired, before this was taped, Anderson Cooper lost his mother. So he's interviewing Stephen Colbert, and he gets back to, he asked Stephen about this phrase that he had heard him say that kind of has to do with some of the issues, some of the experiences that they both shared in their life. And I just wanted to share that with you guys this morning.
You told an interviewer that you have learned to, in your words, love the thing that I most wish had not happened.
I remember.
You went on to say, "What punishments of God are not gifts?" Do you really believe that?
Yes. It's a gift to exist. It's a gift to exist, and with existence comes suffering. There's no escaping that. And I guess I'm either a Catholic or a Buddhist when I say those things, because I've heard those from both traditions. But I didn't learn it that I was grateful for the thing I most wish hadn't happened, is that I realized it. Mm-hmm. Is that, and it's an oddly guilty feeling.
It doesn't mean you are happy.
I don't want it to have happened. I want it to not have happened.
Right.
But if you are grateful for your life, which I think is a positive thing to do, not everybody is, right. And I'm not always, but it's the most positive thing to do, then you have to be grateful for all of it. You can't pick and choose what you're grateful for. And then, so what do you get from loss? You get awareness of other people's loss.
Well, that's true. Empathy.
Which allows you to connect with that other person,
right.
Which allows you to love more deeply and to understand what it's like to be a human being, if it's true that all humans suffer.
Right.
And so, at a young age, I suffered something so that by the time I was in serious relationships in my life, with friends, or with my wife, or with my children, is that I have some understanding that everybody is suffering. And however imperfectly, acknowledge their suffering and to connect with them and to love them in a deep way that not only accepts that all of us suffer, but also then makes you grateful for the fact that you have suffered, so that you can know that about other people. And that's what I mean. It's about the fullness of your humanity. Mm-hmm. What's the point of being here and being human if you can't be the most human you can be? I'm not saying best, because you're going to be a bad person and a most human. I want to be the most human I can be. And that involves acknowledging and ultimately being grateful for the things that I wish didn't happen, because they gave me a gift.
Well, one of the things my mom would often say is that she said, I never ask why me. Like, why did this happen to me? She would always say, why not me? Why would me be exempt from what has befallen everybody, countless others over the centuries? And I think that's another thing that has helped me think, yeah, of course, why not me? This is part of being alive. I mean, this is the suffering is the sadness, suffering. These are all you can't have happiness without having loss and suffering.
And in my tradition, that's the great gift of the sacrifice of Christ, is that God does it too. Mm-hmm. That you're really not alone. God does it too.
Whenever you're struggling, you always feel like you're alone, don't you? Remember when my wife and I were struggling to get pregnant, not me, I look like I'm pregnant, but didn't actually get pregnant. But when we were struggling to have Isaac, it was like, you just felt like you're alone, like you couldn't talk to anybody, you couldn't do it. And when you actually start sharing, you realize, man, there's a lot of people that are going through very similar things. I remember when my grandfather passed away, he was my hero in life, and I just felt so alone. But yet, even literally right there at the services, like, there are so many more family, like literally my family was there hurting just like I was, but you just feel alone. When you face disappointments in life, when you face struggles in life, you just feel like you're alone. And even in the good times, and things are going well, and not just when you suffer, but just things are going well, and you just kind of put your head on your pillow at night, and you're like, man, things are good, but kind of feel empty. You guys ever have that? You're like, man, what's going on here? Like, that doesn't make sense. You feel alone. You feel isolated. You feel like, man, where's their hope in this situation? And there's something about having another human being who's been there, or been through a similar experience or something at least a little close that can say, you know what? I've been there, or at least close to there. There's something powerful about that. There's something powerful when you can speak your story into the life of someone else that's going through something very, very similar. And what we do when we refuse to share our experiences because we're afraid to get out of our comfort zone, when we don't share our experience because we're worried about what people are going to think, or we're embarrassed, or we're ashamed, or we're struggling, we're hurting, we're worried about what people are going to think about us, when we fail to share our experiences, we rob other people of that encouragement. We rob other people of what God wants to do in their life through us. And what we have to do is we have to share our experiences. Come and see what God has taught me in my life. Come and see what God has showed me in my life. Come and see the hope and purpose I've found through Jesus that you can have too. That's what it means to love your neighbor. It's not just, hey, here's a $5 bill, go to Burger King and grab you some cinnamon rolls or something. That stuff's great. But it's sharing the hope and purpose that can be found in Jesus. And so many of us, we feel so alone. We feel so isolated, and what we truly need is someone to come to us and say, man, I know what you're going through. Maybe not exactly, but I've been there, and here's my story, and let me tell you what God has done, what God has taught me, what God has shown me, how God has helped me through my own. And I probably wouldn't agree with Stephen Colbert on everything he believes theologically and his belief and all that, but one thing I wholeheartedly agree with, that the beauty of the story of Christ is that God did it too. He was willing to send his son Jesus to die on the cross for you, to suffer and to die for you because he loved you so much, because he knows everything you've ever done, everything you've ever said, but he still loves you and accepts you right where you are, and he wants to give you hope, and he wants to give you purpose. So the third key from this story that we have to do is to point people to Jesus. When you tell stories, you're not trying to puff yourself up. You're not trying to be the hero of every story. No, you're trying to point people to Jesus. She says, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And listen to what they did. They came out of the town and they made their way toward Jesus. The greatest thing you could do for anyone in your life, your kids, your spouse, your friends, your coworkers, that person you can't stand, the lady at Walmart, the person that's working at Dollar General, the distant family member, the best thing you can do for every person in your life, including yourself, is to point people to Jesus. Because God loved you so much, and he accepts you exactly where you are. But he wants to give you hope, and not just hope, he wants to give you purpose. He wants to help you not through the issues that we have in life, the highs and lows, but he wants to give you an abundant life. He wants to give you something greater even in this life, not to mention what he wants to do for us in the life to come in heaven. He wants to give you an abundant life. He wants to give you a life that has purpose, that has meaning. And that's the story of Jesus. I was talking just a couple weeks ago. We get to go at lunch to the high school and have lunch with some of the high school kids and just do a short Bible study. And one of our next level girls, Sarah Mitchell, she was talking about getting baptized here at C3 a couple of months ago. And it just kind of hit me. So we were talking about what it means to be baptized. And if you guys know what we do, the reason we go under is because it signifies Jesus' death, his burial, and his resurrection back to life. So when we're dead to our old life, we're dead to our sins, and we're brought back up in the new life in Christ. So when we're baptized, it doesn't save us, but it's a symbol. It's telling the world, listen, I am connected to the story of Jesus. And if you're here today, if you're a follower of Jesus, Jesus' story becomes your story. Nothing is too dead for God to resurrect. Nothing is too hopeless for God to not be able to give hope to. Jesus is the answer to everything that we struggle with. Everything we're hurting about, Jesus is the answer. And I know that sounds cliche, and I know it sounds Sunday school, but it's cliche because it's true. So what we need to do is we need to not only point ourselves to Jesus, we need to point people to Jesus. Because Jesus' story is our story. And because Jesus' story is our story can change someone else's story. Verse 39 of our story says, many of the Samaritans from the town believed in him because of the woman's testimony, because of the woman's story. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. Here's how the story ends. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard, we've experienced, we've heard for ourselves. We've experienced for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. When you're willing to step out of your comfort zone, to share your experience, to point people to Jesus, when you're willing to share your story about what you've been through, how God has helped you, how God has taught you through your life experiences, as Colbert said, as you're able to connect with other people, not only do you point people to Jesus, you can change their life. So here's my challenge to you. One more meme. I promise this is our last meme of the day. Here's what I'm challenging you to do. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. I believe that's true. I believe Jesus would say that. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. I promise I saw someone in the back covered up with a blanket like that this morning. I thought it was so awesome. Some of you are literally in that blanket. But notice what she does. She flicks, dips her toes, says progress. Listen, I know for some of you, sharing your story, sharing your past is tough. Number one, because you may have some things in your past that's hard to talk about. It's hard to deal with. Maybe you're dealing with some bitterness or some hurt. You're just going to raise up some emotions. Maybe you're embarrassed of some past mistakes, some slip-ups you've had. Maybe it's some things you just rather not deal with. But let's take baby steps. What I want you to do, here's my challenge to you. And this is going to be tough, but I want to challenge you to do this. I want you to go home today. I want you to think about the people in your life. Maybe write it down if you have to. Just think your coworkers, your friends, your family, maybe people in your small group, people at your church. I want you to write down some names. I want you to think about what they're going through, what they're struggling with. Man, what life is going like for them. And if you don't know, my challenge to you is this week, go out and just ask them, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? What's your story? How's it going? How's the family? How are you feeling? All those type of things. And then either think through or write down like what they're going through. And I want you to go down that list. I want you to pick just one person, just one situation, and put yourself in their shoes. And to try to think back in your life a time you've been in a similar spot. Maybe you went through a divorce and their marriage is on the rocks, and man, I've been there. Maybe you are a child of divorce and you see someone else struggling because they're maybe splitting up or they've already split up and they have kids and they're worried about them scarring their kids. Maybe, man, you've lost a loved one and they're struggling with a loved one that's sick. And you can go and maybe you could speak into that. Maybe they're just struggling at work. Maybe they lost their job. Maybe they don't know how to make ends meet. Whatever it is, just think through, like, what is this person in my life going through? And what have I been through similarly? And then just go and talk to them. Just go and share with them. Say, hey, man, I don't know everything, but here's where I've been, and I just want you to know I'm praying for you. And how can I pray more for you? And anything, is there any way I can serve you? But I just want you to pick one person in your life this week and to go share. You don't have to share the full body of work, but just go share one story. Just dip your toe out a little bit. Because I promise you, you might think people are closed off. You might think they don't want to hear about that Jesus stuff. They don't want to hear about that God stuff. But I promise you, no matter what they think, they truly do. Because our world is starved for hope. Our world is hungry for purpose. The people in your life, they want to live a life of purpose. They want the abundant life that can only come through Jesus. And the only way they're going to experience that is by someone sharing their story. And sharing the story of Jesus and saying, you know what, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to share my experience, and I'm going to point people to Jesus.